Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our English Learning Podcast. Are you excited to sharpen your English skills today? Whether you're just starting out or looking to improve, we've got something for everyone. In this podcast, we'll talk about real-life topics while helping you pick up natural English phrases, expressions, and even idioms. And don't worry if you miss something. Feel free to rewind and listen again because practice is key when learning a language.
Exactly. By hearing real conversations like the ones we're about to have, you'll not only improve your listening skills, but also start speaking more naturally. Today's episode is packed with useful tips to help you sound more like a native speaker. So let's dive right in. But first, Sophia, what's on today's agenda?
Today, we're going to explore a fascinating topic that's become a huge part of our daily lives: the internet. It's everywhere. And it's changed so much about how we live and work. But we're not just going to talk about its benefits. We're going to dig a little deeper and explore some of the issues it brings too. Sebastiane, how are you doing today? Ready for this discussion?
I'm feeling great, Sophia. Super excited to chat about the internet. It's such a broad topic, and I think it's something we all take for granted now. But when you really stop and think about it, it's amazing how much it has revolutionized everything. From how we communicate to how we shop, work, and even learn. It's hard to imagine life without it, right?
Absolutely. The internet has become so integrated into our daily routines that we almost forget what life was like before it. Remember the days when you had to wait for the news or find a book to learn something new? Now, with just a few clicks, we have access to endless amounts of information.
Exactly. It's mind-boggling when you think about it. You can research any topic, get answers to questions instantly, and even take entire courses online. Speaking of that, I personally love how the internet has made education so much more accessible to people around the world, especially those who don't have access to traditional schooling.
That's a huge point, Sophia. Online learning has really leveled the playing field. Now, anyone with an internet connection can learn practically anything. And it's not just education, it's transformed communication too. Whether it's through social media, emails, or video calls, we can stay connected with people from all over the world, and that's something we never had before.
Absolutely. It's incredible how distance no longer matters in communication. I mean, I can video chat with someone on the other side of the world, as if they were sitting right next to me. And speaking of that, online shopping is another huge change. I can now order something from another country and have it delivered to my door within days. It's so convenient.
But with all of these amazing benefits, we have to acknowledge that the internet also has some serious drawbacks. One of the biggest issues is security. We share so much personal information online, and we often don't realize how vulnerable that makes us. Hackers are always finding new ways to steal data, and it's something we need to be cautious about.
You're so right, Sophia. I think many people don't fully understand the risks they're taking when they're online. We post personal photos, share our locations, and sometimes even our financial information, and it's all out there for someone to potentially misuse. And that brings up another issue: privacy. A lot of the time, companies are collecting our data without us even knowing.
Yes, privacy is a huge concern. We think that our personal information is safe, but in reality, it's being gathered by all sorts of websites and apps, often without us realizing it. They use it for marketing, advertising, and even selling it to third parties. It feels like we've lost control over who has access to our personal data.
Exactly. And this data collection is not just a theoretical issue. It can lead to targeted ads, but worse, it can lead to identity theft if the wrong person gets their hands on it. And then there's the problem of cyberbullying. Because people can hide behind screens, they often say things online that they would never say in person, which can be incredibly harmful.
Right. And I think that's one of the darker sides of the internet that doesn't get talked about enough. Cyberbullying can have devastating effects on people, especially young users who might not know how to handle that kind of negativity. And let's not forget how addictive the internet can be. We've all been there, scrolling through social media for hours, and then wondering where the time went.
Yes, I mean, the amount of time I've wasted just browsing mindlessly, it's crazy. The internet is designed to keep you hooked. Social media in particular uses algorithms to keep you engaged for as long as possible. And this can have serious consequences, not just for our productivity, but for our mental health too.
That's a great point, Line. And speaking of mental health, spending too much time online can really affect how we feel about ourselves. We see everyone's highlight reel on social media and start comparing our lives to theirs, which can lead to feelings of inadequacy. It's something we all need to be aware of.
I completely agree, Sophia. The constant comparison can definitely take a toll on your self-esteem. But there's another issue we haven't touched on yet: the rise of fake news. With so much information out there, it can be hard to know what's true and what's not. And unfortunately, false information spreads so quickly online.
That's so true, Sebastian. Fake news is everywhere, and it's often shared without people fact-checking. This can lead to misinformation and confusion, especially on important topics like health or politics. It's really concerning, especially when people rely on the internet as their primary source of information.
And don't forget about the physical effects of spending too much time online. Staring at screens all day can lead to eye strain, headaches, and even poor posture. I know I've had days where I realized I hadn't moved from my desk for hours, which is definitely not healthy.
Okay, let's shift gears a little. I've been thinking about something that a lot of English learners wonder about: grammar. Sophia, how important do you think grammar is when it comes to speaking English fluently? Does it really matter if you make mistakes as long as you can get your point across?
That's a great question, Sebastian. Honestly, I think it depends on the situation. Of course, having good grammar helps you communicate more clearly, but I don't think it's always necessary to speak perfectly to be understood. In casual conversations, people are generally more focused on the message than on how grammatically correct it is.
I agree with that, Sophia. But don't you think that in certain situations, like a job interview or a formal meeting, people might judge you based on your grammar? Even if your message is clear, some might think less of you if you're making a lot of mistakes.
That's true, Line. There are definitely situations where good grammar can make a difference. But I also think it's important to remember that language is about communication, not perfection. People can still express their ideas clearly, even if their grammar isn't flawless.
Exactly, Sebastian. At the end of the day, it's more important to be understood and to connect with people. And if improving your grammar is something you want to focus on, there are plenty of resources out there to help. But we should never judge someone's intelligence or worth based on their grammar skills.
Absolutely. Learning a language is a journey, and everyone progresses at their own pace. We should focus on being supportive and understanding, rather than criticizing others for their mistakes. And honestly, we've all made mistakes when learning a new language. It's part of the process.
That's such an important point, Lean. I think sometimes we're too hard on ourselves when we make mistakes, but the truth is, mistakes are how we learn. So if you're listening to this and worried about making grammar errors, don't be. Just keep practicing, and you'll improve over time.
Exactly. Language learning is about progress, not perfection. And on that note, before we wrap up, I'd like to introduce a few vocabulary words for today. These are words we've mentioned in our conversation, and they're really useful to know: convenient, expand, acknowledge, and drawbacks. Try using them in your conversations this week.
Great words, Sophia. And to our listeners, remember that the more you practice using new words, the more natural they'll feel in your everyday speech. So don't be afraid to experiment with these in your conversations. Practice really makes perfect, or at least progress, and that's what matters.
Exactly, Line. And just to add to that, don't get discouraged if it takes time to get the hang of things. Learning a language is a long-term process, and fluency doesn't happen overnight. The more you immerse yourself, the easier it gets. And that's why listening to podcasts like this one is so valuable. It helps you get used to the natural flow of the language.
Right! It's all about immersion and consistency. And one last thing to remember, it's okay to make mistakes. No one expects perfection, especially when you're learning something as complex as a new language. So keep listening, keep speaking, and most importantly, enjoy the journey.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Sophia. We all start somewhere, and even native speakers aren't perfect 100% of the time. Language is flexible, and the goal is to communicate effectively, not to speak like a textbook. So, to all our listeners, don't stress over the small things. Focus on making yourself understood.
Exactly. And that's something I always try to remind learners. Fluency is about confidence, not perfection. The more you use English in real-life situations, the more comfortable you'll feel. And over time, the mistakes will start to disappear naturally.
Such a good point, Sebastian. It's all about building that confidence over time. So, as we wrap up this episode, remember, the internet has made learning English easier than ever. There are countless resources out there, from podcasts to videos, articles, and more. Use them to your advantage, but don't forget to practice speaking as much as possible.
And speaking of practice, let's do a quick recap of today's episode. We talked about the many benefits of the internet, including access to information, online shopping, communication, and education. But we also highlighted some of the drawbacks, like security risks, privacy concerns, and internet addiction.
That's right. We also touched on the importance of using the internet responsibly and being aware of issues like cyberbullying and the spread of fake news. It's all about finding a balance and making sure we're using technology in a way that benefits us without letting it take over our lives.
Exactly. And finally, we ended with a discussion on the role of grammar in speaking English fluently. Remember, while grammar is important, it's not the only thing that matters. Focus on getting your message across and don't be afraid to make mistakes along the way.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and found our conversation helpful. If you have any questions or suggestions for future topics, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
And don't forget, practice makes progress. So keep listening, keep speaking, and most importantly, have fun with the process. You're doing great, and we're here to support you every step of the way.
Thanks so much for joining us today, everyone. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, keep learning, stay curious, and don't forget to use those new vocabulary words we talked about.
Take care, everyone. And remember, no matter where you are on your language learning journey, you're moving forward. Keep it up.
Goodbye, everyone. We'll catch you in the next episode with more exciting topics and plenty of opportunities to improve your English. Stay positive and keep practicing.